What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today, we're going to learn how to integrate Stripe into our Python applications. In particular, we're going to take a look at how to use Stripe in Flask and Django to allow for payments for individual products or also for subscriptions. So let us get right into it. Alright, so my goal for this video today is to structure the content in 3 different segments. In the first one, I want to give you a very minimal proof of concept. We're going to build a Flask application with a single button. This button can buy something, we can do a payment with Stripe, and then we're going to be redirected to a success page or a cancel page depending on what we did in the interaction. Then I want to move on to a Django application where we're going to have a user model. So we're going to have a registration, a login, and then the user can buy individual items. So we can actually keep track of the orders in the database. And then in the third example, I would like to work with subscriptions. So we're going to actually be able to subscribe to a service and also to cancel the subscription and also handle the events of canceling the subscription so that the user has a certain role in the database. And of course, for all of that, we're going to have to do some coding, but the first thing we need to do is we need to go to stripe.com and create an account. So just sign up if you don't have an account. If you have an account, just sign in. You just have to provide an email or your Google account or whatever. And once you're in the dashboard, once you are on dashboard.stripe.com, what you want to do is you want to create a sandbox because you don't want to actually charge proper credit cards and actually do proper payments. You want to simulate the environment, and then when you build the application, when it's done, you can switch to a live account. But what you want to do is you want to click up here and you want to create a sandbox. In my case here, I already have a sandbox. I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to click here to switch or on switch sandbox. I'm going to click on create sandbox, and then I can choose a name. Here I can also let Stripe generate a name. I don't know, let's go with something like something that sounds cool. Coral Dome sounds nice. Then we're going to copy the account. So I'm going to take the information from my actual live account and I'm going to copy it into the sandbox. I'm going to click on create sandbox. And what this is allowing us to do is we're going to be able to now create products like individual products that can be bought and shipped. We can also buy subscriptions. And all of this can be handled here now in a demo environment. We can do payments without actually doing payments. So that's the idea here. So we can go to the product catalog. We can create a product. For example, I can say this is my sample product. I can add a description, an image, whatever. I can say it's a recurring payment or a one-off payment. For example, let's say this is a 10 euro product, and that's basically it. Add product, and I have my product in the catalog. That's basically it when it comes to the Stripe side. We only need a couple of things here from this website that we're going to use in the code. One is you want to go to home and you want to copy the 2 keys here, the API keys, the public and the secret key. Just click on them, it's going to copy them, and then you want to paste them into an environment file. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. And besides that, you also want to go back to the product. You want to click on the product. You want to click on the price of the product. You're not interested in the product ID. You're interested in the price ID. So you click on the price in the product and you copy the price ID. This is what we're going to use to identify this specific product or the price of the product, this instance that we have here in the database. And these are basically the 3 things that we need, the 2 API keys and also the price ID. Later on, we're going to create a webhook. This is going to be important for guaranteeing the success of the payment and making database changes and so on. We're not going to need that yet for the first proof of concept. So for now, just the 2 API keys and the price ID. So let us now set up the environment. I'm going to go to my tutorial directory, just pick a directory that you want to be working in. And in here now, you want to set up a couple of things. First of all, a .env file, so an environment file. I'm going to just call this .env. Theoretically, you can call this whatever you want. .env is like the default name. And in here now, we want to create 2 keys. One is going to be stripe underscore public key equals, and the other one is going to be stripe underscore secret key equals. And here you want to now copy paste the keys from the home page. I'm going to delete the sandbox anyway, so I can just show you all of that. So I'm going to just paste the key here. I'm going to paste the key here. That's basically it. We're done with that. And then you want to set up your development environment in general. Now you can do that however you want. You can just use your basic Python installation and say pip3 install and the packages. You can go and create a virtual environment, which is like more professional. So Python or Python 3-m vnv.vnv, for example. You can also use virtual env. I personally prefer to use UV, the Rust-based package manager. You, of course, don't have to use UV if you don't want to. In my case, though, I'm going to say UV init to create this UV environment here. And now, since I'm using UV, I'm going to say UV add. You just have to say, if you don't want to use UV, pip3 install. It's the exact same thing. Pip3 install, and we're going to need Stripe, we're going to need Flask, and we're going to need Python -.env. This is the command you want to run. If you don't want to run this command, or if you're using UV, what you have to do is you have to say UV add and the 3 packages. That's basically it. Now, for auto-completion purposes, I'm going to activate the virtual environment that we have here by saying source venv bin activate. Now I'm using the Python version of this virtual environment, and my new Vim knows where to take the completions from. So all of this is not really important to you if you're just using pip3 install. Just install the packages and ignore the rest of what I said. And now we're going to create now a file called main.py. In this case, I already have some structure here. Let's delete that. And here we're going to create a very minimalistic Flask application that allows for payments with Stripe. So let us start with the imports. We're going to say import Stripe. We're going to say from Flask, import Flask, also import render template, import redirect, import URL4. For those of you who don't know about the Flask imports here, this is just the application itself. This just allows us to render HTML files. This here redirects to a different endpoint or URL, and this gets us the URL dynamically based on the function name. That's basically it. And then we also need from.env import load.env to allow us to load the .env file with the API keys. So we're going to do this right away by saying load.env. By default, if your file is named .env, so like .env like this, then it's going to load it automatically. Otherwise, you would have to provide the path here manually. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say stripe.api_key is equal to, and we're going to load now from the environment by saying, I also need to import this, import OS. This is a core Python package. We're going to say OS get env, and we need to load the secret key. So stripe underscore, did I call it secret or private? I'm not sure. I think secret key. Whatever you called this in your environment file. After this, we're going to say app is equal to Flask underscore name underscore, just creating a Flask application. And then we're going to have exactly 3 endpoints. One of them is going to be important. The other one are just for redirecting. One is going to be app.route, the default route, just slash, and we're going to allow here for 2 method types. So 2 HTTP methods, and those are going to be obviously get and post. Because the idea is when we get on this endpoint, we want to get the payment button, and when we post, we want to do the actual payment. We want to actually be redirected to Stripe, and we're going to call this now here or actually let's call this home, not index. You can also call this index, doesn't really matter. And what we're going to do here now is we're going to allow the user to click a button in the case of a get, and in the case of a post. So if request, actually for this we need to also import request, I forgot that. So if request.method is equal to post, so if the request that we get to this endpoint is a post request, what we want to do is we want to actually initiate a Stripe checkout. So we want to go here back to our product catalog. We want to go to the product. We want to go to the price. We want to click on the price ID. And this is what we're going to do here. So we're going to say price ID is equal to the price ID, and now we're going to initiate the checkout session for this product. So I'm going to say price object, and now we're going to use the Stripe package to say stripe.price.retrieve, and the price ID is what we pass here. Now, based on that, we're going to start a session. We're going to say checkout session is equal to stripe.checkout.session.create, and in here now we're going to pass the keyword argument line items, which is a list, and here we're going to have a dictionary which represents our product that we're buying. We're going to say price is equal to price ID, and then we need quantity is going to be equal to 1. That is what we're buying. Then we also need to specify the mode. What are we actually doing here? Are we subscribing? Are we paying? We're going to say mode is equal to payment. Should be consistent here with the white spaces. Let's just not use white spaces. And then we need 2 URLs, one for the success and one for canceling. So we're going to say success underscore URL is going to be equal. And now we're going to use the, actually let me use here white spaces. I think it looks better. Just have to keep it consistent. So success URL is going to be equal to URL for, and we're going to redirect to the success endpoint that we don't have yet. This is going to be a method down here, success. And we're going to say external equals, actually underscore external equals true, plus, and then question mark, session ID is equal to, and here the placeholder, checkout session ID. Now it's very important to understand that this is not a formatted string, so this is not a Python variable here. We don't have an F string here. This is something that Stripe is going to fill itself. So this is something that we pass here as a placeholder, but it's going to be filled by Stripe, not by our Python application. And then we add a comma and we copy that. Essentially, we say cancel URL, same thing for cancel, just without a session ID like this. That is our session, and all we need to do now is we need to do the proper redirect. So we're going to say redirect, or actually return redirect to the location of the session or to the URL of the session. So checkout session.url with a code 303. And if this is not a post request, we're just going to render the template, which is going to be our index.html template. And this is going to be a very minimalistic template. We're going to say here, create a directory templates, and in this directory, index.html. And what I'm going to say here is just a simple, let's say, heading of size 1, home, h1. And then we're going to have a simple form. Method is going to be equal to post. I think I need to use double quotations here. And we're going to close the form. And in here, we're going to just have a single button of type submit. And it's going to say purchase. That's essentially it. This is what we're rendering here, and clicking that button is going to trigger the post request here. Now, then all we need is a success and a cancel endpoint. So app.route. I'm going to call this success like this. And we're going to define a method or function success. And here we're going to check now the status of the payment. So we're going to say get the session ID from the URL. This is what we're passing here with a question mark. This is what is filled by Stripe. So we're going to get that by saying request.args.get, and we're going to get the session ID. And then we're going to say the session is equal to stripe.checkout.session.retrieve. Now we're not creating, we're retrieving the existing session based on the session ID, and then we check is the status of the payment paid or not. And depending on that, we're going to show a different message. We're going to say if session.payment status, payment status is equal to paid, then we're going to return a string that says successfully paid session ID. And then now we're going to use a formatted string. It's going to be session ID. And otherwise, we're going to say something generic like, I don't know, let me use single quotations here. There was a problem with the payment. Or actually, let's go ahead and just redirect to cancel as well. That's simpler. Let's just redirect to URL for cancel. And of course, now app.route cancel def cancel. And here we're going to return a simple text that says payment canceled. All right. And finally, we're going to say if __name __ is equal to __ main __, then we want to do app.run. So we're just running our Flask application, and that is essentially it. This, if we didn't make any mistakes here, should work. And we're going to say here Python 3 main py. I'm going to run this. I'm going to click on this. This should open up in the browser. Now you can see here we have home and purchase. If I click on purchase, what happens is it redirects me to Stripe. Here I can go and do a checkout. How do I do that? I can just provide some sample data like test@test.com. Doesn't have to be real. Same for the card information. You do need to have a valid format, but it doesn't have to be a valid account. So for example, 424242 all the time here is a valid format for Visa. it's of course not a real account. Also, you can provide whatever you want as long as it's in the future here. And then you can just provide any code here, any name. And let's go with something like Mike, I don't know. You can choose any information here, and pay, it's going to be treated like an actual payment. You can see success, and now it says successfully paid. Whereas if I go back now and try to do the same thing and cancel, so if I say now here, okay, back, then it says payment canceled. And this is like the basic proof of concept. We don't have users yet. We don't have subscriptions. We don't have anything in a database. But that is like the basic proof of concept of how you do that in Python with Flask. Here now, I think it may take some time. Or actually, there you go. You have the sale here. This is now simulated. The user paid for it. The user checked out, successfully paid. And now we have here a balance of 942. I think Stripe collects a fee. And you can see how this would look like if this was an actual application. So now let us move on to a more advanced example. We're going to build a Django application with a user system. So we're going to allow for registration and login, and then each user can buy the product, and it's going to be stored in the database with the payment status. So we're going to see, okay, is this order just placed but not yet paid? Is it paid? Was this whole transaction canceled? This is what we want to keep track of. And this requires something that we didn't use up until this point, which is a webhook. So something that Stripe itself can ping if something has succeeded. So when a payment is completed, Stripe can ping this endpoint of our application and tell us that the payment was done successfully, so we can store it in the database as paid, because we don't want to rely just on redirects to success and cancel endpoints. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the main py file, and we're going to start a Django application. For this, of course, you need to install Django. So if you are using pip, just pip3 install Django. And if you're using UV add Django, like this. And then we're going to use Django admin. So Django admin start project to create a new project. Let's call it shop. We're just going to have a single product, but we're going to call it shop anyway. And then we can go into the shop and we can say Django admin start app, and let's call it accounts, and also products. So we're going to have two apps. One is the products and one is the accounts app. This is for authentication. This is for everything related to the products and for to Stripe and payment and so on. So let us get started with the accounts, with the authentication. What we're going to do here is quite simple. We're going to go to the views, and we're going to use a sign up view that is provided basically by default. So we're going to say from Django.views.generic, we're going to import the create view. And then we're going to say from Django contrib auth.forms, we're going to import the user creation form. And then we can just create a class that is going to create a sign up view like this, sign up view, which is going to inherit from the create view. And here we just have to say form class is going to be equal to user creation form. So this is automatically giving us everything we want. Template name is going to be equal to registration/signup.html. And instead of using shortcuts render, we're going to say from Django.urls import reverse lazy. And we're going to say that the success URL, so if you succeed with the login or with the sign up, not with the login, then you will be redirected to login. So once you create an account, you're going to be redirected to login. And of course, login and sign up also need to be registered as URLs. So here we're going to go to accounts. We're going to create a new file, urls.py. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say from Django.urls import path and include. From Django.contrib.auth.views, we're going to import the logout view. And then from .views, so from our own views, we're going to import the signup view. And then we're just going to say URL patterns. This is a keyword. It's important that you call it that. URL patterns is equal to a list of paths. The one is going to be the default path, which is just going to include all the Django authentication paths. So everything is going to be provided here automatically. We're going to say Django contrib auth.urls, just importing everything. Then we're going to say here for sign up sign up slash. We're going to have the sign up view dot as view. Name is going to be sign up. This is important for redirects, comma, and here we're going to say, do I have a comma missing, or why is this not highlighted? Oh, I'm missing a closing bracket here. And then we need logout slash is going to be logout view as view. Name logout. There you go. So these are the URLs. We're going to use that, of course, in our shop. So we're going to go to settings. We're going to go to applications. We're going to install here the applications, accounts, and also products. That is one thing that we need to do. Also, if you don't want to have all this validation stuff, you can comment this out. This will allow you to use passwords like 123. If you just want to use this for testing, I'm going to do it for the sake of simplicity here. And then, of course, we want to go to URLs py of shop, and we want to import here also the accounts URLs. So we're going to say here accounts slash is going to be equal to include. Of course, we need to include here as well. So include. This is now Django basic stuff. If you know all this, just skip it, set it up yourself. But here we're going to say accounts.urls. That is going to allow us to use this. Now, of course, we also need the HTML document. So we're going to say here, new directory templates. In templates, I want to have registration. And in there, I want to have signup.html. Like this. And this is going to be super simple. We're just going to have a heading. Let's say sign up. That's it. And then the form is going to be loaded with a placeholder. So method is going to be equal to post. We're going to have a cross-site request forgery token. So CSRF token here with these percentage signs. And then we're going to load the form as a placeholder. So double curly brackets and say form.as_p. That is basically it. This is going to load everything automatically, closing the form. But of course, in the end, we also want to have a button of type submit, which basically says create user or sign up, whatever you want to call it. That is the sign up. We also want to have a login.html. We also need to link to that, but we're going to do that differently. But essentially, it is the exact same thing. We just copy the sign up code. We're going to replace this by login, and we're going to replace this by login like this. And now we basically only need to set two constants here. We need to say login redirect URL. So where do we go if we log in, or when we log in, we're going to go to /products like this, just /products. And then when we log out, so when we're no longer logged in, we want to be redirected to accounts/login. If I'm not mistaken, that should be everything that we need for the user system. If there is something missing, we're going to notice and we're going to fix it later on. So this is oftentimes the case when I make videos. Sometimes we forget something, we add it later on. So if it doesn't work right away when you test it now, chances are something is missing, but I think this should be it. Now we can move on to the interesting part, which is the product. So we need to, again, connect Stripe. We need to load the keys. We need to set up everything. And the first thing we want to do for that is we want to load, again, the API keys. So we're going to say here from .env, not from doctest, from .env import load.env. We're going to call load.env. And here now we're going to say also importing OS. We're going to say here Stripe secret key is equal to OS getEnv Stripe secret key. Now, in addition to that, later on, we're going to also use a webhook secret, but for now, we're going to not do that. I want to first set up everything else, and then we're going to talk about the webhook system. We're going to start by defining the model of the order. And for this, we're going to import also the settings so we can get the user model. So from django.conf import settings. The reason we want to do that is because an order is going to be linked to a user, and a user is already provided by Django as a default. So we're going to say here class order, which is going to extend from or inherit from models.model, is going to have the following fields. One is the user, which is going to be models.foreign key, so a relationship to an already existing table. And this is going to be the settings.auth_user_model. So that is what we want to link to. A user is the owner of an order, or the initiator of an order, if you want to call it that. We also want to say here on delete cascade. So models.cascade. What this basically means is when a user is deleted, the orders are deleted as well when they belong to the user. And related name is going to be orders. What is the related name? The related name basically is what we call the attribute or the collection in the user object. So I can say user.orders and access all the orders that are linked to this user. So just so I can work with this easily in Python. Then we also want to have a Stripe session ID. This is just going to be a simple character field with a max length of 256. I like to use powers of 2. This is going to be unique, obviously. It's going to be nullable, so it can be empty, it can be blank. All of that is true. Then we're going to say the amount. The amount is going to be just an integer field. So this is going to be the price essentially. And we're going to model everything here as cents. This is the default way that Stripe handles everything. It gives you the cents values. So to keep it simple, we're not going to do some fancy formatting. We're just going to have the cent values displayed and stored here. Then you can do whatever formatting, processing you want to display this in the UI. Then we also want to have created at. So when is this created? When is this entry, this order created? This is going to be a date time field with the auto now at attribute set to true. This basically means that it's automatically going to be now when it's created. And paid is just going to be a simple Boolean field, which is going to tell us if something was paid or not. By default, this should be false. And now with this model, what we're going to do is we're going to go to views.py. We're of course going to import that model. So from models, import the order class. In addition to that, we're also going to say from django.conf import settings. This is what we're going to need later on to load the webhook secret. So we're going to import it already. We're going to also need redirect. We're going to need reverse. And this is basically for reversing the URL. Then we're also going to use from django.http import HTTP response, also HTTP response bat request if necessary, or because we're going to use it later on. Then also from django.views.decorators.csrf, we want to import csrf exempt. The reason for that is we're going to use this with the webhook because we're going to have the webhook endpoint and it's going to get requests from Stripe, not from the application itself. So we want to exclude it from this CSRF protection here. And then also from django.contrib.auth.decorators, we want to have a login required decorator so that certain endpoints cannot be accessed without us being logged in. This makes sense because we cannot place an order if we don't have a user. And now we can start with one of the two endpoints here. One is going to be the webhook endpoint. One is going to be the products endpoint. And we're going to start by saying login required, and then def products is going to be our endpoint. It's going to take request here as a parameter. This is how you write this in Django. I'm going to pass for now because before that, we should also set up certain things like Stripe itself. So I'm going to say also up here, import Stripe. And we're going to set up the API key for Stripe. We're going to say stripe.api underscore key is equal to settings.stripe. Didn't I set it? Maybe it just doesn't recognize it. Yeah, Stripe secret key should actually be present. So stripe underscore secret underscore key. That is how we load that. And then if you want to have multiple products, you can also keep track of them in a constant list here. Price IDs. In my case now, this is just going to be a single product, the one that we had from before. So let's go back to the product catalog because I don't have the price ID anymore. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to put it here as a string. That is what I have here to offer. And now in our endpoint, I can get all the objects. So I can say price objects is equal to turning all these IDs into objects. So I can say stripe dot, what was it? Price dot retrieve PID for PID in price IDs. Now, the actual Stripe logic is going to be quite similar here. We still do the same sort of checkout with the payment, success URL, cancel URL, and so on, but we have to handle the database stuff. So I'm going to say here, if request.method is equal to post, same as before. Now we're going to start by creating a database entry of this order. We're going to mark it as unpaid, so not finished yet, but we're still going to already create it in the database. I'm going to say price ID is equal to request post get, and we're going to get it from the post request by accessing price ID. This is what we're going to post in the HTML. And now we're going to say, I want to create a new order. Order.objects.create. And here I can pass now a couple of keyword arguments. First of all, user is whatever the user is that sent the request. So the authenticated user that sent the request to this endpoint. Stripe session ID is going to be empty by default because we don't have a session yet. Amount is always going to be equal to 1, and paid is obviously going to be false. So paid equals false. There you go. So that is our default order object. And now we're going to create a session. We're going to do the payment, and then we're going to actually add the information here like the Stripe session ID. We're going to save this. We're not going to mark this as paid yet. We're going to do that with the webhook to show you how it works. So we're going to say here that the checkout session, same as before, but we're going to repeat it because it sticks when you do it a couple of times. Stripe.checkout.session.create. We're going to create a new session with the following items. Line items is equal to a list of dictionaries. In this case now, very simple. Just the price is going to be equal to the price ID, and the quantity is going to be equal to 1. Mode is again going to be payment, same as before. And now for the success URL and for the cancel URL, we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. We're going to redirect to this particular endpoint here. We're going to have some flags or some arguments in the URL, depending on whether there was a success or a cancellation. And then we're going to render a message based on that in the HTML in the get part of this endpoint. So I'm going to say here that the success URL is equal to request.build absolute URI reverse this particular endpoint here, products plus, and now question mark, success is equal to 1, and session ID is equal to, again, the placeholder, checkout session ID. Remember, this is filled by Stripe, not by us. So this is not a formatted string. Now for the cancel URL, we have the same principle, just that we say here canceled equals 1, and we don't need a session ID for that. So we can just keep it like this. And now we're going to also pass metadata. Metadata that we can then access later on based on the session ID. And this is going to be the order ID, which is the primary key of our order object. So that we know, okay, this particular session here belongs to this particular order. We can store that information in the session in Stripe, retrieve it later on so we know which one to mark as paid once the payment is done for this particular session ID. So that is how we do that. Actually, amount was not the quantity. So let me set this to 0 because the amount is the price. Doesn't make sense to set this to 1. We can either leave it empty or just set it to 0. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say here the order, the Stripe session ID of the order is going to be equal to checkout session.id. The amount of the order is going to be whatever we paid. So checkout session.amount total. So we can do that. And then order.save. Remember, it's not paid yet. And then return redirect to whatever the checkout session wants us to redirect to the URL. The code is going to be 303. And then last but not least, return render. In the case of a GET request here, we're going to go to products/products.html. And we're going to pass a dictionary object here, which is going to be the prices, or we should say the product list, essentially the price IDs. And this is going to be the price objects here. The idea being that we want to list the products that a user can buy. So we want to have buttons for the products so that we can buy them, also show their price. And then once we post, we're going to choose one of the products. It's going to be processed like this. We're going to have an order, and then we're going to have a webhook that handles the order being marked as paid when done properly. Again, this is just a different way to do it. We saw another way before. Now we're going to do it like this. But when we get to subscriptions, webhooks are going to be essential because we have to react to cancellation, failed invoice payments, and so on. So this is a must. Here now we're just exploring a different way for the products. So let us go to products. Let us create here templates and then products and then products.html. So that is the structure: products, templates, products, products.html. And now we're going to write the code for this file. So maybe I have a snippet here to, yeah, there you go. We have the doc type, HTML, head stuff. This is not really important. We don't need the style sheet. We don't need all that stuff here, or actually we can keep it, but this is just a basic blueprint of a simple HTML application. But we do want to have a couple of things in this site. First of all, I want to have a form for logging out the user, just so I can log out, log in again with a different user. Then I want to have the message based on success or cancellation. Remember, this is the same page that we render when we get to a success or a cancellation. We don't have different endpoints. We redirect everything to the products endpoint. So we're going to end up at this particular HTML document. And then I want to have the form for buying stuff. So I'm going to say here form method is equal to post. And the action is going to be equal to now curly brackets with percentage signs. And I'm going to say URL, actually without parentheses, URL logout. So that is going to be the button for logout, or the form for logout. And in here, we're going to have the button that does it. So button type submit logout, like this, /button. And we also want to have here a CSRF token like that for security reasons. Now the messages are quite simple. We're just going to have a simple if statement here. We're going to say curly brackets if request.get.success. So if this is part of the arguments, then we're going to do something. We're going to display here a paragraph with some styling. The styling is going to be color green, just a success message, success, let's say successfully paid. Keep it simple. Close the paragraph. Then we're going to say also elif if the request.get.cancelled, if that is true. Then we're going to have the same thing in red here, and we're going to say cancelled. And then we're going to have an end if. I'm not sure why exactly my highlighting is not working properly. Maybe I need to open it again. There you go. Now we have syntax highlighting properly for this templating engine. So you can see now we have the proper colors here. That is basically it. That's the logout button. That's the success or cancellation message. And now we get to the interesting part, which is our payment. So we have form. Method is going to be, again, post. And we're posting to the same endpoint, so we don't need to specify any action here. Just form, method post, closing form. Again, of course, the CSRF token. And then we're just going to iterate over our prices, over our products, and we're going to display them and show the option to buy them. So for price in prices, we're going to do also an end for here. And for to close this thing, just a simple heading with the product name. So H3, closing H3, double curly brackets, and then price.product.name. So getting to the product and to the name of the product. Then we're going to have also a simple paragraph with the price itself. So price.unit amount. So how much is it per unit? And then most importantly, we're going to have a button, and this button is going to have a couple of attributes. We're going to have type submit, obviously, but also we're going to have a name for that button, which is going to be the price ID. So that is like an input field itself. It also has a value, and the value is going to be the actual price ID. So that is going to be double curly brackets again, price.id. So just so you understand this, now let's say buy just so you understand what this does, this is exactly what we're getting in the post request in our view. So this is what we get here when we say price ID is request post get price ID. Price ID is the name of the button, and the value of this variable will be the value of the button, which is going to be different depending on which product. Now, this doesn't make sense if we only have a single product. We're just going to have a single product, but theoretically you could have multiple products. This would iterate over the products and display a button to buy each individual product. All right, now let us see if this actually already works. I'm going to close all of this. I'm going to do all the migrations. So we're going to say here Python 3 manage py make migrations. Then I'm going to also say migrate. This is going to do everything here now in a SQLite database. Now I'm going to say Python 3 manage py run server. And I'm not sure if we're going to see anything. Now, we don't have the default route, so that's not a problem. I think we do have a problem, though. I know without even testing it that we didn't add all the URLs. So we actually need to go and say products. We need to go to, or we need to create a new file, urls.py. Here we need to say URL patterns again. And we need to say from Django URLs import path, and then also from views or dot views import products. And here now we need to say path. Default path is going to be products. The name is going to be products. And now importantly, this needs to also be included or loaded in the settings URLs. So we need to actually do that here with products as well. So products include products.urls. I'm not sure, did we already add the application? We did, so that should work. Let's rerun this now. Let's do run server. We have a problem because we forgot a comma. That is not good, of course. That was in shop URLs. We need a comma here. Run the server, go into the browser. That is not an error message. We just don't have a default route. So now I need to go to accounts, sign up. It's going to ask me for a username. I'm going to go with test. Okay, this creates a strong password. I don't want that. Choose my own. Test, create user. Now I should be able to log in with that user. Test. And I cannot go to products. Why? Because we have a type error. Oh yeah, we forgot to enter requests here. So we need to go back to our code. We need to go to the view in products, and we need to actually say render, and we need to provide the request, not just the path. Let's try again. Let's go to /login, or sorry, /accounts. Come on. Accounts, login, there you go, test, login. Now we go to our products here, and I can click on buy, and this should open up a Stripe checkout. I should be able to provide my data again, 4242 all the time. And whatever, let's go with an actual name. Mike is fine. Pay. And this should now create the database object. It should also say successfully paid. If I buy and cancel, it should say canceled. There you go. This works same as before. But of course, we don't have any paid orders in our database. We take a look at the database. We can go into it with SQLite 3. If you have it on your system installed, we can open up the database, and you will be able to see I have the following tables. I have the products order table. So I can say select everything from products order, and you're going to see we have two orders. We have some session IDs here. We have the amount, we have the date, we have the user, which is the last one, and we have the paid, which is 0 for both of them because we didn't handle any webhooks yet. So what we need to do is we need to define a webhook that reacts to certain events that Stripe shoots at us. So we're going to go to products, we're going to go to views, and we're going to create an endpoint for the webhook. So we're going to call this Stripe webhook. It will be just a basic endpoint, but we're going to add here the decorator CSRF exempt because this is going to receive requests from Stripe itself. And here now we need to understand what are we listening for. And in this particular example, we're just going to listen to completed requests. For the subscriptions, we also have to listen for cancellation, failed payment, and so on. But we're going to keep it simple now. And one thing that we need to do is we need to load the webhook secret. So the secret that we want to use here to make sure that the request from Stripe is actually authentic and truthful is going to be settings.secret, or let's say Stripe webhook secret. And of course, for this, we need to load it there. So we need to go to the settings. We need to say Stripe webhook secret. Same thing here, Stripe webhook secret. But the question is, where do you get the webhook from, or the secret from? This, of course, is something we need to put in our .env file. So I'm going to say here also Stripe webhook secret. But the question is, where do we get this key from? Of course, we can create a webhook in the Stripe dashboard, and we're going to do that later on. But I want to show you how you can do testing with the CLI first. So how you can do that without setting up an actual server, how you can just do that locally on your system. And for this, we're going to need something called the Stripe CLI. So the command line interface for Stripe, you're going to just say Stripe CLI. And depending on your operating system, you're going to have to install this differently. There are some package managers here. For Arch Linux, there is an AUR package, which I'm using. So just Stripe CLI is the one, I think. And besides that, you just log in. You just open up your command line. So just say Stripe login. This is going to then open up something in your browser that you can click on, and you will be able to see, okay, I want to use my authenticator app. I have already Stripe with two-factor authentication on my phone, so I can do that. But in my case now, I'm not going to follow the process because I already have this authenticated. I'm already logged in. And once you're logged in, you want to listen. So what we want to do is we want to say Stripe listen, and I think the flag was /to, and then HTTP localhost port 8000 in the case of our application, then products, then let's say our webhook will be at Stripe webhook, something like this. Well, let's go with Stripe -webhook. Then that is going to be forwarding the events to this particular endpoint. And now we have the secret key that we can use here locally on our system for testing purposes. How does this work? We're going to see how it works. Let me just replace this here. And we're not even going to handle anything fancy here yet. I'm just going to show you that when I run this, when I say Python 3 manage py run server, we can see what requests are coming in, and I can trigger events with the Stripe CLI. So I can actually go and open up a new terminal here, and I can say Stripe trigger, and I can say checkout session completed. This is going to trigger an event, and you can see what happens here as a result of me triggering the event with the CLI is it tries to post here on the endpoint. Now this fails, of course, because we don't have the endpoint yet. We didn't create the Stripe webhook endpoint yet. We don't have the URL for that. But you see that this is what happens. When I trigger that here for development testing purposes in the command line, this is being posted to the webhook URL that I provided here as a forwarding endpoint. So it works in theory. We have the key. The key is now important to check whether the request is authentic or not. So it's going to use our public key to send something, and you can then check with the secret key if this is actually a truthful request. And this is, of course, important because we have it in the .env file. So that is what you specify here. I'm going to show you how to do that actually with proper webhooks in the Stripe dashboard. But for now, we're going to use the CLI for testing. And we're going to go now into shop. We're going to go to products. We're going to go to views, and we're going to develop our, we're going to implement our webhook endpoint. How we do that is the following. The package that we get from Stripe will contain a payload. The payload is going to be the body of the request. And it's also going to contain a signature. So a signature header, sig header is going to be equal to request.meta.get, and it's going to have a HTTP Stripe signature. And if we don't have it, we're just going to return an empty string. Now what we're going to try to do is we're going to say event is equal to stripe.webhook.construct event based on the payload with the signature header confirmed with our secret key or checked with our secret key. And if all of this belongs together, if we have a proper payload, a proper header that can be verified with our secret key, then this is going to succeed. We're going to have a successful event being triggered. Otherwise, we can wait for two exception types, one being a value error and the other one being stripe.error.signature verification error. So if the signature cannot be verified with our secret key. In this case, we're going to return an HTTP bad response or HTTP response bad request. And then we can look at the event and see, okay, what type of event is it? You can also handle multiple events. In this case, now we're just going to check for a single event type. So we're going to say if the event type is equal to checkout.session.completed, if that is the event that is being sent to this webhook here, then we're going to say session is equal to event data object, session object that is being completed here. And we're going to extract from the metadata that we passed here. Remember, we're going to extract the order ID back to know which order to mark is paid now. So we're going to say session metadata, which we passed before, dot get from the metadata the order ID. This is important. And now we're going to say, okay, if this works, I'm going to say order.objects.filter, find the order with that specific order ID where the primary key is equal to order ID and where paid is equal to false. Does this exist? If yes, update to paid equals true. And in the end, return HTTP response with a status 200. So that now should mark the order as paid. Let's see if this works. We can take a look at the database again. Let me just briefly run the server again. What's the problem here? No such file or directory, manage py, of course, because we're not in the shop directory. Let's try again. There you go. Server is running. Let us take a look again at the database. I'm going to open up one more terminal here. I'm going to go to my tutorial directory. I'm going to go to the shop. And I'm going to clear, so I'm not blocking this with my camera. I'm going to say SQLite 3, db SQLite 3. I'm going to say select everything from, what was it, products order. Now you can see we have these two orders here, 1 and 2. These are the order IDs, the primary keys, 1 and 2, both unpaid here. And what I can do now is I can trigger a session event. Nothing is going to happen when I do that, by the way, because when I do that, oh, sorry, I forgot one more thing. This is not what I meant, but of course we need to add the URL. We need to go to URLs and we need to say that Stripe webhook, actually without the slash, so Stripe slash webhook is going to be Stripe webhook, and we also need to import it here, Stripe webhook. And of course, don't forget the comma. But this is not what I meant, because now when I run the server, it's going to work. I'm going to trigger an event. We're going to be able to post to this endpoint. It's going to succeed. We get a 200. Everything's fine, but nothing is going to change in the database. Why? Because we don't have the proper order ID submitted. This is just not part of the metadata that we pass here since we're triggering this artificially. So actually what I need to do here for this to work is I need to say trigger checkout session completed. And then I need to say --add, and we need to say checkout session : metadata order ID is equal to, and then whatever order ID I want to mark is completed. I'm going to go with 1 now. I can run this. It will send the requests to the webhook endpoint. And now when I look into the database, you can see this one is marked as paid. And now I can do the same thing for order 2. And we're going to see that this order is going to be marked as completed as well. There you go. So that is how you do that with webhooks. Now, of course, working with the CLI is not what we want to do in reality. We want to actually work with the webhooks provided by Stripe itself. So let's close this command line here. Let's also close this CLI version here. We can keep the server running. I'm going to close the database. What we're going to do now is we're going to set this up in the actual Stripe dashboard. So I'm going to go here to the catalog or wherever I was, and I'm going to click here on the developers button. So maybe you find it somewhere here, maybe you find it down here. You're going to click on developers, you want to click on webhooks, and now we can set up a webhook here that is going to trigger automatically. The problem here is you cannot just do that with localhost. This is not going to post to localhost on your own system because this has to be something where Stripe can actually send the request to in the internet, something public. And I don't want to get into the details here of ngrok, but I'm going to show you how to do that with ngrok, because ngrok is something that allows you to temporarily have a public URL that you forward to your private application on localhost. I have a video on this, I think, on the channel. So if you want to check that out, you can do that. Otherwise, just imagine this is your public server IP or server domain. So if you have something like http myserver.com, you would place this here. I'm going to just use an ngrok URL to show you how this works. Right now, this is running on localhost port 8000. I have ngrok set up on my system. And what I can do now is I can say ngrok http 8000. What this is going to result in is I have now a public URL that you can access on the internet. So I can copy that and I can go into my browser. I can say /accounts/login. And I can use my web app now. I can confirm this. I can use my web app now in the browser. The reason this doesn't work immediately is because this is not allowed as a host. So what I would have to do is I would have to take that and add it to the allowed hosts in my application. How do I do that? This is something I have to do in the settings PY. I have to go to allowed hosts and I would have to specify here the host name. So actually I don't even need the HTTPS stuff, just this. And also I want to say CSRF trusted origins is going to be equal to this URL here and also the HTTP one. This is important for us to be able to allow for these connections. So run the server now again. I can reload the page, I can visit, and now I can use my login here in a public URL. Right now, when you're watching this video, no longer, but right now, if you were to go to this URL, you would be able to use it. This is a public URL, so I can also provide it to Stripe. Let us go back to the webhooks here. I can say add destination. I can choose my account, leave the API version. Here now I can choose the event I want to listen to. In my case now, I'm just going to go with completed. Checkout session completed. This is the thing that we're listening to in the webhook. So whenever something like this happens, post to my webhook address, I can choose my custom endpoint here. I can give it a name. I don't know. Let's just generate one. I don't know. And here now I can provide my webhook URL. So products/stripe/webhook. And then I'm not sure, do I need a slash in the end? We're going to see. I'm going to just create the destination here. And what this does now is when a payment succeeds, it's going to post to this webhook URL. Now we can test that. I can go to the application. I can log in with test and test. I can make a buying transaction and go again with test. I can go again with a bunch of 4.2s. And hopefully this is right now going to bad request. Okay, why is that? Yeah, of course it doesn't work because we didn't update the webhook secret. We created a webhook, but we didn't update the respective secret key. So we need to go to our webhook and we need to use the correct signing secret. We're still using the one from the Stripe CLI. So you want to go to this one, you want to copy it, and you want to replace it in the environment file. So let's close this. Let's go to the .env file, which is, I think, one directory up. So .env, and you want to replace this secret key here because otherwise the signing is not going to work. So let's go back to shop. Let's go back to Python 3 manage py run server, and let's try the whole thing again. I'm going to reload the page. I'm going to try to buy again, and let's see what happens now. there you go. We got a webhook here to 200, or with 200 success code. We got successfully paid. And now if I look into the database, let's close the application. If I go with SQLite 3 into the database, I should be able to see that the last transaction, the latest one, is marked as paid. The one before that, not, because we had this bad request problem, but now for this one, I should get successfully paid. So select everything from product order. And there you go. This one is marked as paid. So this is how you use webhooks. Now let us move on to working with subscription products. So let's go to our product catalog and create something like a membership. So maybe you have a SaaS application, you want to have a membership in there. How can you do that? You go to the product catalog, you create a product, you call it, for example, membership basic or whatever. Then what you do is you type, or you select your recurring, and let's say this costs $20 per month, monthly billing period, then add product. And what we can do now is we can set this up with a profile. So we're going to take this, it still has a price ID, but the payment works differently because now we have, of course, payment completed, but then we have also invoicing on a regular basis. So automatic payments, these can fail, the user can cancel their subscription, all these things need to be handled. So we now need a more advanced webhook, and we also need a different user model. We're going to keep evolving our application, or changing our application. The first thing I want to do is I want to go to accounts, and I want to go to the models, and here I want to create now a profile that is linked to a user. So I'm going to say here class profile, and this profile is models.model, is a model from the models module. And here we're going to say this is linked to a user. This is just models one-to-one field. And of course, for this, we need to import again from Django conf import settings. Same as before, just the settings dot auth user model on delete is equal to cascade again. So models dot cascade. And the related name is profile. So the user has a profile that is linked to it. And the reason we want to have a profile in the first place is because we want to have a premium membership. So we can say is premium. And this is going to be a simple Boolean that tells us if this user is a premium user or not. So it's going to be a Boolean field with a default of false. Now we also want to make sure that such a profile is created every time a user is created. So we're going to say signals.py. We're going to create a new signals file here, and we're going to say in this file from django.conf import settings, to use the user again, from django.db.models.signals import post safe, from django.dispatch import receiver, and from models we want to import the profile class. And then we're going to use the annotation here, receiver post safe. Sender of that is going to be settings.auth user model. Basically, when an auth user model instance is created, we also want to create a profile. So that is going to be triggered in this case, create profile, where we pass sender instance created and additional keyword arguments. If created, so if the user was created, we're going to say profile objects create, and we're going to link to the user. So user is going to be the instance that was created. Just a simple signal so that every time a user is created, we create a corresponding profile. And in order to be able to use that, we need to now go to apps, and we're going to say def ready. So when this is ready, come on, ready. Then we're going to say import accounts signals a single time so that we can set up the signal. Then we also want to change the model that we have for the order. We don't want to have an order anymore. We want to have a subscription. So I'm going to replace this here with subscription. And we're still going to have a user. We're just going to call this now subscription or subscriptions if we want to have multiple of those. We don't want to have a session ID. We want to have a subscription ID. But it's not going to change the data type. We want to have a status, the status of this particular subscription, which is going to be a character field. So char field max length is going to be, let's go with 32. We're not going to have too long strings here. Let's go with default is going to be active. But we could have values here like active, past due, canceled, unpaid, and so on. And then we're going to have current, we're actually going to keep create, but we're going to say current period end. And this could be a datetime field that is nullable. So nullable and blankable, if you want to call it that. All right, so that's just a simple change here. And the important thing now is how we handle everything. So we're going to try a different approach here. We're not going to create any objects before we get to the webhook. So we're not going to have anything like this here. We're just going to say, first of all, import subscription, not order. We're going to still keep the same price IDs. Of course, we're going to change the price ID, but the system is going to be the same. But we're going to change the approach. So we're going to say, instead of passing the order ID, which we now don't have anymore, we're going to pass some client information. I'm going to pass a client reference ID, and this client's reference ID is going to be the ID of the user object. So request user ID. User of this request, the user that sent the request, the ID in the database, the primary key is going to be passed here as information, and then we can retrieve that in the webhook. So before we forget it, let me just briefly change the price ID here. So we have it done. There you go. And now in our webhook, we're going to keep this part here the same, or actually this part here the same, but we're going to handle the events differently now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, give me the subscription ID. The sub ID is equal to the data that we get to this webhook subscription with lowercase s. And then we also want to have the user ID. This is going to be the integer of data, and here we get now the field that we set, client reference ID. So data client reference ID, turn that into an integer, and then we want to retrieve the user object. The user is user objects get, and we're going to get the user where the primary key is equal to user ID. Then we want to retrieve the actual subscription object. So sub is going to be equal to stripe subscription dot retrieve based on the subscription ID. And now we want to create our database object. The database object is going to be created by saying subscription objects create. And now we can put this into our database, because remember, when we get this event, the payment succeeded. So we can mark this user as premium now. So we say user is equal to user, and then stripe subscription ID is going to be equal to the sub ID that we retrieved from the payload. And by the way, we need to say not create, but we need to say update or create, because we want to also be able to update a subscription that maybe isn't active anymore. And for this, we're going to provide the defaults as a dictionary here. We're going to say for the status, the default is going to be whatever we got here from the subscription. And then for the current period end, and for this I need to import from datetime import datetime, because now we're going to say here datetime from timestamp sub current period end. We do that if this is present, if this is not none, basically. So if we can get it from the subscription, so if there is a current period end, then do that. Otherwise, give me none. And then basically, once we have that, we're just going to mark this user as premium. So this user is premium. Premium is true. Or actually, sorry, user profile. User profile is premium is true. And then user profile safe. That is basically what we do here. We wait for this event to happen, payment succeeded, session completed, now the user is premium, and then we have other events that can happen that can change this status. For example, the subscription could be updated. This is something that we can listen for by saying elif event type is equal to customer.subscription.updated. If that happens, we can update the subscription, and the data is also already part of the payload. So the status, the new end of the period and so on. This is part of the data that we get from Stripe. So we can say actually subscription.objects.filter, and we can say, okay, I'm looking for the subscription with the ID that is also passed by Stripe. So data ID is going to be the Stripe subscription ID. Take that and update this object in the following way. Set the status equal to data status. And then also the current period end being equal to, and then we can just copy this from before. So we can just paste this here like that. The only difference here is we don't get it from sub, we get it from data. So data get and sub get. And this would basically handle the update. So whenever something changes in the subscription, we can also just say make the database change. And then we could do something like, okay, if the status is changed to something that I don't like, I can remove the premium status from the user profile if I want to. Another thing that I could listen for is canceling of the subscription or failed payment. So if there's a problem with the payment, we don't get paid, then we can also remove the status is premium, or we could do something else. How you react to it is up to you, but you can catch these events with the webhook. So we can say if the event type is, for example, customer.subscription.deleted, which is basically the cancellation, or event type is equal to invoice.payment_failed. That would also be an event. In this case, we could remove the premium status from the user. We could say try to get the subscription, try to find it in the database. So sub is equal to subscription .objects.get. And then again, Stripe subscription ID, data ID. Find the subscription. If you cannot find it, so if there is an exception, which is the subscription.does_not_exist, if that is thrown, we can just pass. Otherwise, this is maybe a structure that you don't know, that a lot of people probably don't know, is this try else structure. This basically means if there is no exception being thrown, then we can say status of the subscription is going to be set to canceled. We're going to save the subscription, and then we're going to get from this subscription the user, from this user the profile, and we're going to set is premium to false, and we're going to save this profile. So remember, a subscription belongs to a user, and the user has a profile, so we can access by saying sub user profile, and we can then save the changes to the database. That would be now a webhook that listens to 4 different events. Now, one more thing that I would like to implement, and then we can try this, is I would like to allow for cancellation. So I would like to add an endpoint here that can allow the user to cancel their subscription. So cancel subscription, request as a parameter here. And the only thing we want to do is we want to send the message to Stripe to cancel the subscription. So first of all, we need to check if there is a subscription that can be canceled. We're going to do that by saying sub is equal to request user subscriptions. This is now exactly what we do when we specify in the model, by the way. So if we go to the models, you will see we have the user, and then we have related name subscriptions. This is why we provide this, because we can now access the subscriptions from the user objects directly. So request user subscriptions, try to find a subscription that is active. So where the status is equal to active. And then we're going to cancel this subscription. We're going to just assume that there's a single one, so dot first. And we're going to say if this does not exist, if we don't have such a subscription, let's just do a return redirect products. And otherwise, if there is such a subscription, what we're going to do is we're going to say stripe.subscription.modify. So we're going to take the subscription. We're going to have to pass the ID, so the Stripe subscription ID. And we're going to say that we want to cancel at period end. We want to set this to true, which basically means it's not going to be canceled right away. So the event is interesting. The event of the cancellation, the deleted event, is not going to be triggered immediately. It's only going to be triggered once the subscription ends, which makes sense because if the user cancels their subscription, but they paid for the current month, you don't want to remove their premium status before it actually runs out. So you actually want to keep the premium to true, and only when the cancellation actually goes through, only when the deletion happens, then you want to remove the status. So we're going to return here as well. Actually, let me just copy that. The products page. All right, so that is it. I hope I didn't make any mistakes. If I didn't make mistakes, this should now work. I can run this. Of course, it doesn't work. Let me see what that is. It is probably in our accounts here, in the apps. Yeah, we need to pass self as a keyword here, since this is in a class. I hope that's the only problem. We can run the server. I can click on the server. I can go to /accounts login. Oh, actually not, because I have to use it here. So I have to go to accounts login like this. Now I'm going to create a new account because I think that the profile is not created for the existing one. Of course, I could do that manually, but I'm going to just create a new one. Let's call it tester. And of course, we need to do the migrations because otherwise it doesn't work. We need to say Python 3, manage py, make migrations, and then also migrate, because otherwise, of course, we don't have the database changes yet. So let's reload after starting the server. Let's reload the site here. Let's try again. Tester. Okay, it actually created the user, so let's try something else. Let's say neural 9, and then test as the password. Create user, there you go. Neural 9. Test as the password. And now I can buy this for 2,000 cents. So for 20 euros, I can click on buy. And we have another problem because, of course, we still have the mode payment in there, which is not the correct one. The correct one that we want to use is the mode subscription. This is something I forgot to mention. We need to go to the views again. We need to go to our payment here. And this is not payment. This is now subscription. Subscription, like this. It's important to specify this difference. Otherwise, we run into problems. Now let's run the server again. Let's go to login again to make sure we're logged in properly. Of course, it's account login, neural 9, and test. Now let's try to buy the subscription. Also, before we do that, let me show you that I'm not a premium member at the moment. So let's go to the tutorial directory. Let's go to the shop. Let's open up SQLite 3, the database here. What is the table name? It's accounts profile. So we're going to go and say select everything from accounts profile, semicolon. And what you see here is the ID of the account of the profile. Then we have here the ID of the user. So user ID 3 is neural 9. And here we have is premium set to 0. Now, if I complete the payment here, if I provide my usual information with Mike, then I can click on pay and subscribe. But I actually noticed 2 more problems. First of all, I didn't define data, which is a problem. And second of all, this is something that we didn't run into yet, but I noticed it as well. We need to, of course, modify our webhook to listen to all these events, because currently our webhook only listens to the completed event. But in addition to that, we also need to provide up here the data, because we're using data all the time. And the data is from the event, the data, the object, the actual event object. So that is important because otherwise we cannot refer to data all the time. That is one thing. The second thing is we want to go to our webhooks again. So here we want to modify the webhooks. So actually, we need to click on webhooks. We want to go to this webhook here. Want to edit the destination. And here now we need to go to the events. We need to click on all events. And now we can listen to updated. We need subscription updated. So down for the S subscription, or actually it was customer subscription updated. This is the one. Then we had something with payment failed. This was invoice payment failed. And then we had deleted, which is customer subscription deleted. So now I can save that. Now our webhook here listens to 4 different events, as you can see. And when one of these happens, we're going to be informed, or we're going to get a request to our endpoint. Let's try again. Let's check again that we are still not premium. There you go. Now let us go to our page again. Okay, another unnecessary bug in the code. We can go back to products. We can go back to the views. We need to import here from Django contrib auth models the user model. Forgot to import that because of course we're using the user model here and we didn't import it. Because of that, our server failed. So let's run this again. And when I now pay, I should hopefully get the proper response here. There you go, posted to the webhook with 200. If I now look into the database, I can see that I'm now a premium user. And the interesting thing is, or the cool thing is, I can now force a cancellation. First of all, I can do the cancellation here, but it's not going to really do something for me. So I don't want to actually go through the cancellation here, because what this is going to do is it's going to mark the subscription as canceled, and then it's going to cancel it at the end of the period. I can also go to the dashboard and I can cause an event myself. First of all, I can cause events here, but I can also just cancel the subscription. I can go to the customers and I can select a customer. The last one was this one, Mike with test@test.com. He bought the subscription. So what I can do is I can go to this particular subscription. I can click on the 3 dots and I can say cancel subscription. I can cancel the subscription of this particular user. I can say immediately, no refund, cancel the subscription. And as a result of that, I'm going to receive a call to the webhook. And when I look into the database, I'm no longer premium. So this would also happen if the user cancels, and then at the end of the period, this event would be triggered. But you can see this is how you can work with Stripe in Python. It's not trivial, but it's also not too complicated. And of course, there's many more things that you can do here. This was like a basic introduction. How can we cancel? How can we subscribe? How can we do payments and keep track of stuff and react to events? But yeah, this is how you can use Stripe in Python. Let me know if you're interested in projects where I actually implement this or implement a project that uses this, for example, a simple web shop. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video and bye.